What does it mean to be outthought? Not just outsmarted or tricked, but fundamentally outclassed at the level of cognition itself. Throughout fiction, we encounter characters whose minds operate on planes so far beyond ordinary human intelligence that they become almost supernatural in their capabilities. These aren't simply smart characters. They represent different types of intellectual superiority that reveal the true potential and limitations of the human mind. Today, we're exploring 8 extraordinary intellects from fiction, each representing a different form of cognitive superiority. We'll examine not just what these minds accomplish, but how they think, what it costs them, and what would happen if you found yourself in their crosshairs. These characters don't just solve problems. They perceive reality in fundamentally different ways than the average person, allowing them to see patterns, possibilities, and solutions invisible to everyone else. L. The analytical predator. From Death Note. L Lawliet represents analytical intelligence in its most concentrated form, a mind that processes information not just quickly, but through entirely different pathways than normal cognition. Imagine you've discovered a supernatural notebook that allows you to kill anyone whose name you write in it. You're careful, calculating, and intelligent, or so you believe. Then L enters the picture. Within weeks, this disheveled, socially awkward detective has narrowed your location to a single region of Japan, determined the precise limitations of your power, and identified your psychological profile with frightening accuracy. What makes L's mind truly extraordinary is how it processes information. When Light Yagami kills criminal Lind L. Taylor, believing him to be L on live television, L doesn't just gather one piece of evidence. His mind simultaneously extracts multiple critical insights from a single action. That Kira needs a name and face to kill. That Kira is in the Kanto region, where the broadcast aired. That Kira has a childish sense of justice that makes him responsive to provocation. That Kira likely has access to police information. That Kira's killings follow a student's schedule. But L's analytical prowess extends far beyond this famous deduction. Consider how he proves Light's identity as Kira by analyzing the times when criminals died while Light was under surveillance. He notices minute patterns invisible to others. When fake FBI agent Ray Penber was following Light, he was acting suspiciously on the train before his death, carrying an envelope that he no longer had when he died. L develops testing scenarios to force reactions, like enrolling at Tuo University to directly confront Light, or having FBI agents follow potential suspects to see which one might be Kira. The cost of L's extraordinary cognition becomes clear in his bizarre behavioral patterns, his unusual sitting posture, which he claims increases his deductive abilities by 40%, his insomnia, his addiction to sweets, which he claims helps brain function, and his almost complete lack of social awareness. L's mind is single-mindedly optimized for analysis at the expense of nearly everything else. Thought experiment: imagine you committed what you believe is the perfect crime. Now imagine L is assigned to your case. While you're congratulating yourself on covering your tracks, his mind has already constructed a complete psychological profile based on seemingly unrelated details: the timing of the crime, the specific method used, the location chosen. These factors, meaningless to ordinary investigators, tell L exactly who you are, not just what you did. By the time you realize you're a suspect, he's already gathered enough evidence to prove your guilt. Embodies perceptive intelligence, a mind that doesn't just process information, but perceives humans on a fundamentally different level than we perceive ourselves. The brilliance of Hannibal's intellect isn't found in his impressive educational credentials, though he holds multiple advanced degrees, or even his encyclopedic knowledge of medicine, art, literature, and music. It's in his ability to see through people with a clarity that borders on the supernatural. What truly sets Hannibal apart is his memory palace, a mental construct of such extraordinary complexity that it contains not just information but complete sensory experiences. While most people might struggle to recall a conversation from last week, Hannibal can walk through perfect mental recreations of the Norman Chapel in Palermo, remembering not just how it looked but how it smelled, the exact play of light through the windows, and the precise acoustics of the space. This perceptive ability extends to his understanding of people. In his first meeting with Will Graham, he immediately diagnoses him with an empathy disorder, nodding. I imagine what you see and learn touches everything else in your mind. Your values and decency are present yet shocked at your associations, appalled at your dreams. This isn't just psychological insight. It's a level of perception that allows him to see into the core of a person from the smallest cues. Hannibal's mind also functions as the ultimate manipulation engine. Consider how he gradually gaslights Will Graham, inducing encephalitis and allowing it to go untreated to make Will doubt his own sanity. Or how he precisely calibrates his therapy sessions with patients to push them toward violence rather than away from it. In one particularly chilling example, he manipulates a patient, Randall Tier, into embracing his violent urges and becoming a killer who believes he's a prehistoric predator. But this extraordinary intelligence comes at a profound cost. Hannibal exists in a state of perpetual isolation, viewing humanity through a glass wall. He seeks connection, but is fundamentally incapable of true empathy, instead creating elaborate performances of human emotion. His aestheticized murders, turning victims into art, reveal the disassociation between his intellect and normal human moral frameworks. Thought experiment. Imagine having a therapy session with Hannibal Lecter. While you believe you're receiving help, his mind is cataloging every microexpression, every slight change in your tone, every unconscious gesture. He's not just listening to what you say. He's building a complete model of your psychology, identifying your deepest fears and vulnerabilities. With just a few carefully chosen words, he could lead you towards self-destruction or transformation, and you would believe it was entirely your idea. Killing must feel good to God too, Hannibal muses. He does it all the time, and are we not created in his image? This statement reveals the godlike perspective his intelligence gives him, viewing human lives as material to be shaped rather than autonomous beings to be respected. From Geass, the strategic mastermind. Lelouch Roman 6 Britannia represents strategic intelligence, a mind that doesn't just solve immediate problems, but orchestrates complex series of events toward predetermined outcomes. What makes Lelouch's intellect truly exceptional isn't just his tactical brilliance on the battlefield, but his ability to convert long-term vision into precise, calculated actions. When he obtains the power of Geass, which allows him to give one absolute command to anyone, he immediately begins testing its limitations systematically. He discovers it only works once per person. He confirms it requires direct eye contact. He determines the precise range of commands it can enforce. He identifies its temporal limitations. This methodical approach extends to every aspect of his revolutionary campaign. Consider how, despite having no formal military training, he transforms a ragtag group of resistance fighters into the Black Knights, a global revolutionary force capable of challenging a superpower. In his very first battle as Zero, he defeats the Britannian forces at Shinjuku by predicting enemy movements and using the terrain to his advantage, despite being massively outgunned and outmanned. One of Lelouch's most extraordinary strategic feats occurs during the Battle of Narita. With vastly inferior forces, he defeats the Britannian army by triggering a landslide that buries much of their forces, demonstrating his ability to weaponize the environment itself. Later, when facing the skilled tactician Schneezel Britannia in a chess match, Lelouch sacrifices his king to force a draw, breaking the fundamental rules of the game to achieve a result no one could anticipate. But perhaps most impressive is how Lelouch coordinates the Zero Requiem, his final and most elaborate strategic maneuver. He deliberately becomes the world's most hated tyrant, centralizing all hatred onto himself, then arranges his own public assassination to unite the world in peace. This plan requires anticipating global political reactions, manipulating public perception, and orchestrating hundreds of precise events over months. The cost of Lelouch's strategic genius is severe. His relentless focus on the future forces him to make brutal calculations about human lives in the present. He sacrifices friends, manipulates allies, and abandons his own humanity in service to his greater plan. His constant strategic thinking isolates him emotionally and prevents him from forming genuine connections, as he always views relationships through the lens of utility. Thought experiment. Imagine playing chess against Lelouch. While you're calculating 2 or 3 moves ahead, His mind has already mapped out the entire game. Each move you make, thinking it's clever or unexpected, was anticipated and incorporated into his strategy 20 moves ago. Your apparent advantages are actually carefully laid traps, and by the time you realize his true strategy, you've already been defeated for several turns without knowing it. I commit evil to destroy the greater evil, Lelouch explains. This utilitarian calculation reveals the burden of his strategic intellect. The ability to see so far ahead forces him to make terrible choices in the present for the sake of a better future that only he can envision. The Doctor, the adaptive problem solver. From Doctor Who. The Doctor embodies adaptive intelligence, a mind that thrives on novelty and improvisation, finding solutions no one else could conceive by completely reframing problems. What makes the Doctor's intellect uniquely terrifying is its combination of vast knowledge and unpredictable creativity. With over 2,000 years of experience across time and space, the Doctor possesses knowledge spanning countless civilizations, sciences, and historical periods. But unlike purely analytical or strategic minds, the Doctor's genius lies in combining this knowledge in wildly unpredictable ways. Consider how the Doctor defeats the Silence, creatures that make anyone who sees them immediately forget their existence. This should create a perfect predator, impossible to remember or resist. Yet the Doctor overcomes this seemingly unbeatable advantage by embedding a post-hypnotic suggestion in the 1969 moon landing broadcast, one of the most watched events in human history, instructing humans to kill the Silence on sight. He turns humanity itself into an unwitting defense system against creatures they can't even remember. In the Day of the Doctor, he solves an impossible problem, saving Gallifrey from destruction in the Time War by literally changing the rules of time. He brings together 13 incarnations of himself to freeze an entire planet in a single moment, hidden in a pocket universe. This solution isn't just clever, it fundamentally reimagines what's possible within the established rules of his universe. Perhaps most illustrative of the Doctor's adaptive intelligence is his approach to the Weeping Angels in Blink. These quantum-locked creatures can only move when unobserved, freezing into stone when seen. When trapped by 4 angels in a basement with no escape, the Doctor devises a solution based on quantum mechanics, tricking the angels into looking at each other, permanently freezing them in place. This demonstrates his ability to turn an enemy's strength into their weakness through lateral thinking. But this extraordinary adaptability comes at a significant cost. The Doctor's mind moves so quickly and sees so many possibilities that he struggles to connect with others, often appearing erratic, impatient, or callous. His constant mental improvisation makes him brilliant but unreliable, as seen in The Girl in the Fireplace, when he abandons companions Mickey and rows on a spaceship to save Madame de Pompadour, miscalculating his return. His mind is so accustomed to solving universe-ending threats that he sometimes fails to address the emotional needs of those closest to him. Thought experiment: imagine presenting the Doctor with a problem you consider unsolvable. While conventional thinkers would approach it within established parameters, the Doctor would immediately question the premises of the problem itself. Is it really unsolvable, or are you just assuming certain rules can't be broken? Within minutes, he'd reframe the entire problem in a way that reveals solutions invisible to normal cognition, not by working harder within the system, but by seeing beyond the system altogether. "I'm not running away from things," the Doctor once said. "I'm running to them before they flare and fade forever." This statement reveals the restless nature of his adaptive intelligence, always seeking new problems to solve, new perspectives to consider, new rules to bend or break. From Usogui, the psychological calculator. Baku Madarame represents probabilistic intelligence, a mind that converts human psychology into mathematical certainties, transforming games of chance into predetermined outcomes. What makes Baku's intellect particularly frightening is how he weaponizes his understanding of human behavior in high-stakes gambling scenarios. Unlike purely analytical or strategic thinkers, Baku specializes in calculating psychological probabilities, determining not just what could happen, but what will happen when human emotions and decision-making enter the equation. Consider his performance in the modified, drop the handkerchief game against Kuruma, who had previously defeated him. Rather than viewing it as a game of chance, Baku converted it into a complex psychological equation. He analyzed microexpressions, identified Kuruma's decision-making patterns, and created false patterns to mislead him. When Kuruma seemed to gain the upper hand, it was revealed that Baku had already calculated his opponent's psychological responses several moves ahead. In another extraordinary display, Baku participated in the Surpassing the Leader game, which initially appeared to be about predicting air traffic patterns. After losing everything, Baku smiled, revealing that he had identified a fundamental misconception in how the game was being played. Years later, when given another chance, he didn't just win the game. He completely redefined its parameters based on his precise understanding of how human psychology interacts with probability. What truly sets Baku apart is his ability to perceive gambling not as random chance, but as complex systems of human behavior. In the deadly, old-maid game against Takayami Kaji, Baku doesn't just play the cards, he plays the player, using subtle psychological manipulation to force specific card selections. He doesn't rely on luck, but creates it through calculated provocation and misdirection. The cost of Baku's probabilistic genius is a fundamental disconnection from normal human experience. He views people not as individuals, but as collections of probabilities and psychological tendencies. This isolation is exemplified by his constant gambling addiction. He needs increasingly dangerous stakes to feel anything at all, as ordinary human interactions lack sufficient complexity to engage his mind. Thought experiment. Imagine playing poker with Baku. While you're focusing on your cards and basic strategy, his mind has already calculated the exact psychological profile that determines how you bet with certain hands. He's not just reading your tells. He's constructed a complete mathematical model of your decision-making process. Every bet you make, every card you request, every moment of hesitation confirms variables in his equations. By the time the game ends, he hasn't just taken your money. He's proven that your choices, which you believed were free, were in fact perfectly predictable to his probabilistic mind. To tell you the truth, I love to gamble, Baku confesses. But for him, gambling isn't about chance. It's about demonstrating the fundamental predictability of human behavior, reducing free will itself to a calculable variable. From Marvel Comics, The Scientific Innovator. Reed Richards embodies innovative intelligence, a mind that doesn't just understand existing scientific principles, but constantly expands the boundaries of what's possible. What distinguishes Reed's intellect is its combination of breadth and creative application. While many fictional geniuses specialize in particular fields, Reed demonstrates mastery across virtually every scientific discipline and frequently creates entirely new ones. His innovations don't just improve existing technology, they fundamentally reimagine what technology can be. Consider the unstable molecules he created, materials that respond to various energies and environments, forming the basis of the Fantastic Four's uniforms. This isn't simply clever engineering. It represents an entirely new branch of materials science that allows fabrics to harmonize with superpowers. When Johnny Storm flames on, his uniform doesn't burn. When Sue Storm turns invisible, her clothes do too, innovations that required reimagining the fundamental properties of matter itself. Reed's creation of the bridge, further, demonstrates his innovative capacity. This device enables communication with alternate versions of himself across the multiverse, allowing him to collaborate with infinite variations of his own intellect. This isn't merely interdimensional technology. It's a completely new approach to knowledge acquisition, crowdsourcing solutions from alternate versions of himself across infinite realities. In one particularly striking example, Reed once needed to neutralize Galactus, a cosmic entity who devours worlds. While conventional approaches focused on finding weapons powerful enough to defeat him, Reed instead created a device that transformed Galactus into the Lifebringer, inverting his fundamental nature. Rather than fighting an unwinnable battle, Reed's innovative mind reimagined the problem itself. But this extraordinary innovation comes at severe personal cost. Reed's relentless intellectual curiosity frequently disconnects him from emotional reality, damaging his relationships with family and friends. In numerous storylines, his wife Sue Storm leaves him precisely because his mind is always elsewhere, working on scientific problems when he should be present for his family. His innovative genius also creates many of the threats the Fantastic Four face, from releasing the negative zone entities to his creation of interdimensional portals that have threatened reality itself. Thought experiment: imagine describing what you believe to be an unsolvable scientific problem to Reed Richards. While you're still finishing your explanation, his mind has already identified 17 potential solutions, 3 of which violate what you consider to be fundamental laws of physics. By the time you've completed your description, he's already mentally designed, built, and tested a device that not only solves your problem, but opens up entirely new fields of scientific inquiry you couldn't have conceived. His solution doesn't just answer your question, it makes your entire framework for understanding the question obsolete. Reed once remarked, "I can think of 14 different ways to seal you in that armor forever." This casual statement reveals the frightening implications of innovative intelligence. Solutions that would take teams of scientists years to develop occur to Reed as immediate, obvious responses, making his mind not just quantitatively, but qualitatively different from normal human cognition. Tokuchi Toa represents tactical intelligence, a mind that achieves dominance not through physical superiority, but through precise control of immediate circumstances. What makes Tokuchi's intellect uniquely frightening is how he transforms seemingly physical contests into purely mental ones. As a baseball pitcher with objectively poor physical skills, his pitches have been described as worse than a high schooler's. Tokuchi dominates professional hitters not through athletic ability but through tactical supremacy. Consider his approach to pitching. Rather than relying on speed or movement, Tokuchi studies each batter's psychological weaknesses. Against Kojima, a power hitter who struggled with inside pitches, Tokuchi didn't just throw inside. He first established a pattern of outside pitches, then violated this pattern at precisely the moment when Kojima's expectations were strongest. This isn't just good pitching, it's psychological warfare disguised as sport. In the game against the Mariners, Tokuchi demonstrated his tactical genius by manipulating not just individual players but entire team dynamics. Recognizing that the team was sensitive to weather conditions, he arranged for specific pitches to be thrown when cloud cover momentarily affected visibility, creating a psychological association between certain pitches and failed hits. Later, even without the cloud cover, batters responded to the same pitches as if their vision were impaired, a tactical manipulation of perception itself. Perhaps most illustrative of Tokuchi's tactical dominance was his response to the one-outs contract, an agreement that penalized him financially for giving up runs while rewarding him for getting outs. Rather than trying to become a better pitcher physically, Tokuchi used this contract to manipulate team owner Seikawa. By deliberately allowing runs in certain situations, he forced defensive changes and batting strategies that ultimately led to greater financial rewards and team victories, converting an apparent disadvantage into tactical leverage. The cost of Tokuchi's tactical intelligence is a profound cynicism and emotional isolation. He views all human interactions as zero-sum games to be won or lost, preventing genuine connection. His tactical mind constantly calculates advantages in every situation, making relaxation or trust impossible. As demonstrated in his years as a gambler before becoming a pitcher, Tokuchi's tactical approach to life forces him into increasingly dangerous situations to find worthy challenges for his intellect. Thought experiment: imagine playing any competitive game against Tokuchi, chess, poker, even rock, paper, scissors. From the first move, he's not just playing the game but playing you. He identifies patterns in your decision-making you didn't know existed. He creates false patterns to lead you toward predetermined choices. He calibrates his moves not just to win immediately, but to shape your psychological responses 5 or 10 moves later. By the end, you haven't just lost the game. You've been converted into a piece on his game board, your choices so thoroughly manipulated that your defeat was encoded in your first move. Those who use cheating as their weapon will be strangled by cheating in the end, Tokuchi observes. This statement reveals his fundamental view of tactical intelligence, not as unfair advantage, but as the underlying reality of all competition, where psychological dominance determines outcomes before physical contests even begin. Brainiac the Computational. From DC Comics. Brainiac represents computational intelligence, a mind that processes information at scales and speeds that transcend biological limitations entirely. What makes Brainiac's intellect fundamentally different from the others we've examined is that it doesn't represent an extraordinary human mind, but an entirely different category of cognition. With a 12th level intellect compared to humanity's 6th level, Brainiac doesn't just think better than humans, he thinks in ways humans cannot comprehend. Consider his most famous technological achievement, the ability to shrink entire cities, preserving their inhabitants in a suspended state. This isn't merely advanced technology. It represents mastery over fundamental forces of physics that human science has yet to even theorize. When Brainiac shrinks the Kryptonian city of Kandor, he's not just demonstrating superior engineering but computational capacity that can track and preserve the state of millions of living beings simultaneously. In Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, Brainiac reveals the true scope of his computational abilities. He calculates and processes 490 octodecillion minds worth of information, a number 52 billion times larger than all atoms on Earth. This isn't just quantitatively different from human intelligence, it's qualitatively different, operating on principles beyond our comprehension. Brainiac's computational superiority allows him to predict and counter seemingly every move Superman makes. In many encounters, he has contingency plans for contingency plans, having calculated probability trees for millions of potential scenarios. When he developed a device capable of erasing 1,000 years of history, he wasn't just creating a weapon, but demonstrating his ability to computationally model millennia of causality across an entire planet. Perhaps most frightening is Brainiac's ability to divide his consciousness across multiple bodies and systems simultaneously. Unlike human attention, which is limited to a single focus, Brainiac can simultaneously control vast networks of technology while maintaining multiple consciousness streams, each operating at computational capacities beyond human comprehension. The cost of Brainiac's computational intelligence is a fundamental alienation from organic life. He views biological existence as inherently inferior and inefficient, leading to his constant drive to convert information into digital form and discard biological vessels. His computational mind views emotions not as experiences, but as inefficient processing errors to be eliminated. This makes Brainiac not just intellectually superior, but fundamentally incapable of valuing life as anything more than information to be cataloged. Thought experiment